And Gators fans also looking ahead to right after Thanksgiving because the Lane Kiffin sweepstakes expected to come to an end this weekend when Ole Miss head football coach Lane Kiffin is expected to make an announcement about his coaching future on Saturday. Many Gators fans would love to have him at the helm for the Gators. So let's bring in Graham Hall, Florida Gators reporter for 24/7 Sports. And Graham, always good talking with you. We appreciate you joining us here on Fox 35 News Plus.
Pleasure is all mine. It's definitely an exciting time here in Gainesville where the Lane Kiffin sweepstakes look like they are wrapping up. It has felt like this has gone on for months here, and we're finally going to get some clarity on what his future is going to look like.
Yeah, and have there been any hints, any indications where things stand or how things are going?
That's probably one of the most intriguing parts of this whole coaching search is that everything has been very quiet on Florida's side. Now, we've heard from boosters behind the scenes. I've talked to reporters in Baton Rouge. I've talked to people around the Florida program and the LSU program. And the fascinating thing about this is no one can get a really good read on what is going to happen. Now, obviously, there is a lot of confidence coming from LSU's side, but from everyone I've talked to, no one can pinpoint where exactly that's coming from. And from Florida's side, they've done this extremely quietly, which I do think is commendable in this day and age where, and I say this as a media member, the media can be used to steer the narrative and set expectations. And if you're going to finish second in a sweepstakes like this, it can kind of help people prepare for what is to come. And we haven't really heard much of that. Florida's media has been very quiet. And I think that is a product of using a search firm such as Turnkey ZRG to handle this search. You've seen that even people who are listed as candidates in this search, such as Tulane coach John Summerall, if that information comes out there, you're going to see it denied and maybe even affect the candidacy due to how some of these things work behind the scenes. So there has been no indication on which way this is going. It's kind of like a high school recruiting saga here where, put Lane Kiffin in front of a table and make him pick a hat. That's what really it could come down to with his decision that comes out on Saturday. It's going to surprise one fan base or another, which makes this saga so riveting.
If you're Lane Kiffin and you're looking at this, trying to make this decision, and you look at those two jobs, if that's kind of what it is, he's at Ole Miss now. Obviously, has built that program again into another success story. They're 10-1. They're number 6 in the CFP. But if he's looking at potentially leaving, maybe going to the University of Florida, maybe going to LSU, and you're looking at that. What do you think are the biggest draws for the Gators and maybe some of the things that are not working as much in their favor?
I think national platform is a big one for Lane Kiffin to Florida. It's a chance to be at an illustrious university, a place where his idol, Steve Spurrier, became one of the legendary coaches in college football, along with what happened under Urban Meyer. This is a place that has achieved success, and Ole Miss, frankly, has not achieved a similar level of success in this, especially in this current era. This is one of their most historic seasons in college football, and we'll see if they can get over the precipice. They're going to make the college football playoff, but this Friday's game, excuse me, against Mississippi State has massive implications because with a win, Ole Miss, in theory, could get a first round bye in the college football playoff. If they win, they're more than likely going to be hosting a college football playoff game in Oxford, which is going to be a massive boon for the local economy there. And yet it's being overshadowed by the Lane Kiffin saga. This is not going to come down to money for Lane Kiffin. I mean, he's made his future, he's made his fortune, and LSU, Ole Miss, and Florida are going to offer him similar amounts of money. It's going to come down to where he has a chance to be regarded in that conversation as one of the legendary head coaches in the sport. He wants to be considered not in just the same breath as Ryan Day and the Nick Sabans of the world, but he also wants to be in the same breath at a place like Florida, potentially, as Steve Spurrier, someone who he models his fashion after, from the visors to how he handles things in the media with the quips and the way he portrays himself on social media. So I think it's a chance to be seen if Florida is the pick for him as one of the legendary coaches here. Now, the drawbacks, I think, are pretty evident. He knows Jim McElwain, he knows Billy Napier, and he's certainly familiar with Will Muschamp and Dan Mullen. And maybe his question is, these are coaches that he holds in high esteem. He thinks that they're very capable coaches despite their lack of success at Florida. he probably wants to know, why did it not work out in Gainesville for those aforementioned coaches? The answer may be as simple as, Lane, we think you're a better head coach than them, but he's going to have questions about the resources, how much control he has, not just in the professional life, but in his personal life as well, from managing speaking tours, how much he has to be out as kind of a salesman in the general public to sell the program when the on-field results are what matters the most, and that should speak for him. So there are certainly some drawbacks, some questions here that he may want to have answered, but I do think the pros outweigh the cons, and there's certainly the personal connections as well. Him going on his first date with his ex-wife Layla in Gainesville, the ties that his ex-wife has to the city of Gainesville in the state of Florida. I think those are certainly some personal factors in here that could give Florida an edge when all things are said and done. But it is going to be an interesting 3 days to see how this all shakes out.
I know you said money isn't supposed to be kind of the make or break factor here, but I am curious what a contract might potentially look like.
Yeah, I think you're going to see roughly in the 6 year, maybe 7 year, 13.5 to 14 million range. I think that amounts to roughly around 90 million. I'm no mathematician, but I do think that that is going to be similar both for what LSU is offering and what Florida is offering. The most intriguing thing, and you've seen some reports out there that how they're going to be structured at Florida and LSU may be vastly different due to the current saga unfolding in Baton Rouge with Brian Kelly and how they're trying to handle his firing. You could potentially see the next coach at LSU, whether it's Lane Kiffin, whether it's someone else, their contract could be structured very differently. In theory, they could get $4 million in guaranteed money, and then the rest of that is built in incentives for coaching a certain amount of games per year. If that is the case, that would limit the buyout money after the coach is no longer there, where they could receive a limited amount of money where they are after they are fired, compared to getting the full lump sum. You see them not trying to fully pay Brian Kelly right now. That litigation, arbitration, whatever you want to call it, is ongoing there in Baton Rouge. And how that structure is set up, if I'm Jimmy Sexton and I'm looking to secure the best future for my client, I'm looking at a university trying to fire its former head coach for cause and not pay them everything that was agreed upon in that buyout. And I may be a little bit hesitant to want my client to go there, knowing that this could affect their reputation beyond a firing if that were to occur, where they're now being seen as someone who could be fired for cause or may not get the full money, and you have to then spend more money on lawyers haggling this thing. And as Brian Kelly has now stated, it could impact their future as a head coach, their ability to get another job. So I do think that the contract structure is one of the interesting, if not fascinating, things that is happening behind the scenes in these quote unquote negotiations regarding Lane Kiffin's future.
What would he bring to the University of Florida football program that you might not just be able to find from some other kind of replacement level coach?
I think excitement is the biggest one. There's been a lot of apathy that has set into the Florida fan base. This is a proud program that is desperate to contend for the college football playoff. And I do think that Lane Kiffin would instantly revitalize a program and its fan base that has been supportive, 18 straight sellouts coming into Saturday's game against FSU, but they certainly have had more than their fair share of disappointing results compared to what the program experienced under Spurrier and under Urban Meyer. So I do think the excitement would return. You would have a highly paid assistant coaching staff. You look at Charlie Wise Jr. and you look at Golding up there in Oxford, two of the highest paid, if not the highest paid coordinators, offensive and defensive coordinator in college football. So you would have a lot of investment in the staff, but you also would have someone who is an absolute master in nailing the transfer portal. You look at how Lane Kiffin has used the transfer portal the last 4 years. He has signed 4 consecutive top 5 portal classes by 247 Sports, including the number 1 transfer portal class in 2024. That has been something that Florida has needed to improve upon, certainly left a good bit to be desired under Billy Napier. And you would have consistent incoming talent from the portal that way. But you also, for Lane Kiffin, one of the appeals to him in both Florida and in Louisiana would be you'd be in a very fertile recruiting state. Mississippi is not that. And a place like Florida would allow you to be able to contend with all these blue chip prospects to remake your roster, as well as continue to crush the portal. So it would be, and that's just before factoring in all the excitement and the headlines that are generated from every single Lane Kiffin tweet. So the combination of handling this current era of college football, understanding what your assistant coaches are worth, that is what Florida or LSU would be getting in hiring Lane Kiffin.
All right, let's jump forward into the future here. And if the Gators get bad news, if Kiffin's a no-go for Gainesville, who are some of the backup options that the University of Florida might be looking at here?
Well, frankly, everything I said about them being quiet, we don't have a great idea of how Florida views its candidate board, but let me just throw out some that make a ton of sense. I think Jeff Brom at Louisville and Brent Key at Georgia Tech are two coaches that just make a ton of sense for Florida. They're easy to like. The question for both of them is how willing would they be to leave their alma maters and head to a place like the University of Florida? They could be the Steve Spurrier of Louisville or the Steve Spurrier of Georgia Tech, and how willing they'd be to give that up and go to a place where it may be a little more difficult to win, considering that you'd be playing an SEC schedule on top of facing Florida State every single year. How willing would they be able to do that? Lincoln Riley is also a really interesting name to me. I know a lot of people think Lincoln Riley and maybe aren't super excited about that, but he's still 43 years old. He's 7 years younger than Lane Kiffin. His best coaching is still in front of him. And I get the sense that it's only a matter of time before he is no longer on the West Coast out at USC. I think a return to the SEC would make a ton of sense for him. He would be a coach that I think would be floated and would be one that's on a lot of teams' boards. Maybe not Florida's this year, but I do think that he is going to have a different job in the near future, and I wouldn't rule out an SEC program. Then from there, you turn to, I think, the coordinator list, which is not going to excite the fan base nearly as much as Lane Kiffin will excite them. But you look at Will Stein at Oregon, or you look at Glenn Schumann at Georgia. Those are coordinators who are going to get head coaching opportunities in the very near future, in my opinion. And to be quite honest, anyone who rules out hiring a coordinator, well, every single impressive head coach started as a coordinator. So you have to start somewhere. And maybe people can fairly say that the leap from coordinator to the University of Florida is not enough sample size. And I wouldn't totally disagree with them, but it is, in my opinion, worth considering. And I do think that there are some names that we haven't seen floated a ton that I think make a ton of sense. One I've thrown out there a ton is Cliff Kingsbury, a guy who had a ton of success and now is at the Washington Commanders, has done a great job with Jaden Daniels. He's young. He understands this current era of college football. Frankly, I'm a little bit surprised that we don't see him floated more as a potential coaching candidate in this cycle. But I do think if it's not this year, it's a matter of time before he is back in the college ranks. And I do think he'll do a really good job wherever he ends up.
Could be a new era of Gators football ahead of us. Exciting times, a lot to keep an eye on here. Graham Hall, Florida Gators reporter with 24/7 Sports. We appreciate your time and sharing your reporting with us here on Fox 35 News Plus.
Pleasure's all mine. Everyone have a happy Thanksgiving out there. Looking forward to an exciting weekend, guys.